sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so get ready, because today we are diving deep into the world of high finance and social media.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, it is. Remember all that buzz about Elon Musk buying Twitter?
Oh, yeah.
Renaming it X? Well, things just got a little bit more interesting. A listener sent in this article from the Economic Times about some big banks trying to quietly sell off the debt that they took on to help Musk buy the platform in the first place. Are you intrigued?
Definitely. What really catches my eye is that the banks are hoping to get 90 to 95 cents on the dollar.
Oh, wow.
Which, I mean, that might sound pretty good, but we're talking about billions of dollars here.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
It is. And that tells you a lot about how risky investors still consider X to be.
Yeah, I mean, the banks aren't exactly like running to the exits to try to dump this debt, are they?
Right.
I thought that's usually what happened after these big acquisitions.
Yeah, usually banks will package up these loans and then sell them off pretty quickly just to minimize their own risk. So holding on to them for this long, yeah, that's a red flag.
That's a problem.
It suggests that they were worried about finding buyers who would pay a decent price for it. You know, think of it like trying to sell a used car that's had a few fender benders.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
You're not going to get as much for it.
So what happened that made these banks so hesitant to sell it in the first place?
Well,
This article dives into some of the turbulence that X has seen since Musk took over.
sure.
I mean, we're talking layoffs, we're talking policy changes, even some of the,
Right.
shall we say, colorful characters that Musk seems to welcome on the platform.
Yeah. And all of that has spooked advertisers.
Uh-huh.
And they're the ones who keep the lights on at any social media company, right?
Right.
So when advertisers' confidence goes down, revenue also goes down. And suddenly the banks are sweating a little bit, wondering if X can actually pay back these massive loans.
Yeah, that makes sense. This article also mentions something that I hadn't really considered, and that's the political angle. It hints that Musk's political alignment might actually be making X more attractive to certain investors.
Interesting.
That one kind of threw me for a loop, I gotta admit.
Yeah. What we're seeing here is that investment decisions aren't always just about the numbers.
Uh-huh.
You know, spreadsheets, things like that.
Right.
They can be influenced by a whole range of factors, including political viewpoints.
Interesting.
Some investors might be drawn to a platform that aligns with their own beliefs,
Okay.
while others might see it as a way to tap into a particular audience.
Okay, so basically, depending on who's holding the purse strings,
Right.
a company's political leanings can become an asset or a liability.
Exactly.
That's kind of wild to think about.
It is.
But before we get too deep into that rabbit hole, let's back up for a sec.
Okay.
Can you give our listeners a quick rundown of who exactly is involved in this whole saga?
Sure.
The article throws around a lot of big bank names.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just a solo act. We're talking about some major players in the global financial system. Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Barclays,
Yeah.
even Mitsubishi UFJ,
Okay.
and Societe Generale from Japan and France.
Okay.
This was a massive coordinated effort to finance Musk's takeover.
Wow. A real international affair.
It is.
So we've got this web of banks, a mountain of debt,
Yeah.
a social media platform that's been making headlines for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
I'm already hooked, and I think our listener is too.
I think so, too. I think we've only just scratched the surface here.
Let's do it. I'm particularly curious about how this debt sale could impact X in the long run.
Okay.
Is this just a bump in the road, or is this a sign of bigger trouble ahead?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And to answer it, we need to understand not just the financial mechanics at play, but also the power dynamics.
Okay.
Whoever buys this debt gains a certain amount of leverage over X's future.
Ooh, okay.
And that's where things could get really interesting.
Okay, now you've really got me on the edge of my seat. But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Sure.
let's take a closer look at what happened back in late 2022 when the banks first tried to offload this debt.
Okay.
This article says that they were looking at a potential 20% loss back then. What changed between then and now?
That's a great question.
And what does that tell us about how X is perceived in the market today?
Yeah, it's a puzzle with several pieces to it.
Okay.
We'll need to dig into X's financial performance since then, the overall market conditions, and of course that political angle that we just talked about.
Okay, so let's break it down. First, what exactly was happening in the financial world back in late 2022?
Well, 2022 was a wild ride for the markets overall.
Yeah.
We had rising interest rates, fears of a recession, the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Investors were fleeing to safer assets, and they were exactly eager to buy up risky debt tied to a social media platform that was, shall we say, going through some growing pains.
Okay, so basically bad timing all around.
Pretty much.
It's like trying to sell a house during an earthquake.
Yeah, not a good look.
What about X's own financial performance during that period?
Right.
Did things improve enough to make the banks feel more confident about selling now, even if it means a smaller loss?
Well, that's where things get a little murky.
Okay.
X, like many social media companies, doesn't exactly broadcast its financial statements. But we can glean some clues from this article and other publicly available info.
I'm all ears. What kind of clues are we talking about?
Well, this article mentions that the banks are now hoping to recover 95 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
Which is a significant improvement from that potential 20% loss they were facing in late 2022.
Right.
So this suggests that either X's financial picture has brightened somewhat, or the market's perception of its risk has shifted.
Okay.
Or maybe a combination of both.
Okay, that makes sense. But how can we tell which of those factors is playing a bigger role?
Right.
Is there any way to kind of separate X's own performance from the overall market sentiment?
That's where the real detective work comes in.
Okay.
We need to look beyond just this one article.
Consider
other factors like X's user growth.
Right.
Its ability to attract and retain advertisers.
Okay.
And, of course, any public statements that Musk has made about the company's financial health.
I love a good detective story, especially when it involves billions of dollars.
Me too.
And speaking of billions, let's not forget about the elephant in the room.
Sure.
Or rather, the billionaire in the boardroom.
Right.
How much of X's current situation can be attributed to Elon Musk himself?
Ah, yes. The Musk factor.
Yeah.
It's impossible to discuss X without acknowledging the influence of its CEO. His decisions, his pronouncements, all of that has a direct impact on investor confidence and the company's perceived value.
And let's be honest, Musk isn't really known for being predictable.
No, he is not.
Or risk-averse.
Right.
So how do we even begin to factor in his influence on this whole debt sale situation?
That's the tricky part.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a CEO who's known for making bold moves, sometimes seemingly on a whim. He's not afraid to shake things up, which can be both exciting and terrifying for investors.
It's like watching a high-stakes poker game, but the players are constantly changing the rules.
That's a great analogy.
At the table.
And in this particular game, Musk holds a lot of the cards.
Right.
His vision for X, his ability to attract top talent,
Okay.
even his personal brand, all of that plays a role in determining the company's fate.
So it sounds like we need to understand Musk's end game if we want to fully grasp the implications of this debt sale. What are his long-term goals for X?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
But what we can do is look at his past ventures, his public statements, and his actions to try and piece together his strategy.
Okay, I'm ready to play armchair psychologist. Let's start with his past ventures.
Okay.
What can we learn from those about his approach to business and his willingness to take risks?
Well, Musk has a track record of building successful companies, from PayPal to Tesla to SpaceX.
Right.
He's not afraid to disrupt established industries and challenge conventional wisdom.
Okay.
He's also known for being extremely ambitious and setting these seemingly impossible goals.
So he's not afraid to swing for the fences, but does that mean he's always successful?
Of course, no one has a perfect track record.
Yeah.
Even Musk has faced challenges and setbacks along the way.
Right.
But he's also shown this remarkable ability to learn from his mistakes and bounce back stronger.
So he's a risk taker, but he's also a survivor.
He is.
But how does that translate to his vision for X? What does he ultimately want to achieve with this platform?
That's where things get a bit more philosophical.
Okay.
He's talked about creating a digital town square, a platform for free speech and open dialogue.
Right.
He's also expressed interest in integrating X with other services, potentially creating a super app that encompasses everything from social media to payments to transportation.
Wow, that's a pretty grand vision. But how does that tie into the whole debt sale situation?
Right.
Do investors believe in his vision enough to overlook the financial risks?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
Some investors might be willing to bet on Musk's ability to turn X into a powerhouse.
Right.
Even if it takes time and involves some bumps along the way. Others might be more skeptical, especially given the current economic climate and the volatility of the social media market.
So it's a gamble either way. But what about those political factors we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
Could Musk's political leanings be swaying certain investors, either for or against him?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In today's polarized political landscape, a company's perceived political alignment can become a big factor in investment decisions.
Right.
Some investors might be drawn to a platform that aligns with their own values, while others might shy away from one that seems too controversial.
It's like trying to navigate a minefield of ideologies and agendas.
It is.
Let's not forget about the banks that are trying to sell this debt.
Right.
What are their motivations? Are they simply trying to cut their losses, or do they have a larger strategy at play?
I think it's likely a combination of factors.
Yeah.
They're certainly eager to get this debt off their books and minimize their exposure to risk. But they're also sophisticated financial institutions with their own agendas and priorities.
So it's not just a simple fire sale?
No, it's more complicated than that.
There's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Let's bring it back to our listener.
Okay.
Why should they care about this whole debt sale drama?
Right.
How could it potentially impact their experience on X?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is about more than just money and spreadsheets.
Okay.
It's about the future of a platform that millions of people use to connect,
Yeah.
share information, engage in public discourse. The outcome of this debt sale could influence everything,
Okay.
from the features and content X offers to its policies on moderation and censorship.
So it's not just some abstract financial transaction.
No, it's not.
It has real-world implications.
Yes, it does.
For how people use and experience this platform.
Absolutely.
And that's something worth paying attention to.
It is.
But before we dive into those potential implications, let's take a closer look at the different types of investors who might be interested in buying this debt.
Okay.
Who are these players and what are their motivations?
That's a crucial question.
It is.
And it takes us deep into the world of finance. We're talking about hedge funds, private equity firms,
Wow.
sovereign wealth funds.
Okay.
Each of these players has a different risk appetite, a different investment strategy, and a different vision for what they want to achieve.
It's like a whole ecosystem of financial predators,
Right.
each with its own hunting style.
Exactly.
But before we get lost in that jungle, let's take a step back
Sure.
and recap what we've learned so far. We've established that this debt sale is a complex situation with multiple layers and players. We've also explored the potential impact of Musk's leadership, the political landscape,
Right.
and the motivations of the banks involved. I think there's one crucial element we haven't fully addressed yet.
Okay, what's that?
We've talked about the sellers, the potential buyers,
Yeah.
the platform itself. But what about the users?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, how might this debt sale impact the millions of people who rely on X for news, entertainment, and connection?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
We're talking about potential changes to the platform's features.
Okay.
Its content moderation policies, its advertising strategy.
Yeah.
All of these decisions could be influenced by the new owners of this debt.
So it's not just a financial transaction.
Yeah.
No, it's a potential power shift
It is.
that could have a profound impact
Love it.
on how X is run and experienced.
Absolutely.
And that's something worth exploring in more detail.
Yeah, it's almost like this debt is a ticking time bomb. Depending on who ends up holding it, it could either stabilize the platform or blow it up in a whole new direction.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. Say a hedge fund, one that's known for aggressive cost cutting, ends up buying this debt.
Right.
What kind of changes might we see on X?
Well, they'd likely pressure X to become profitable very quickly.
Okay.
And that could mean more layoffs, a bigger push for paid subscriptions, maybe even selling off parts of the business.
Wow.
It wouldn't be pretty for users who are used to a certain type of experience on the platform.
On the flip side, what if a buyer comes in who's more aligned with Musk's grand vision, someone who sees X as more than just a social media platform?
Then we might see even more rapid innovation.
Okay.
Maybe even some of those super app features Musk has hinted at.
Right.
The user experience could become more integrated with other services,
Uh-huh.
but it might also feel less familiar, more experimental.
So depending on the buyer, X could become a lean, mean, profit-making machine.
Right.
Or a sprawling, futuristic digital playground.
Exactly.
Either way, sounds like big changes could be on the horizon.
Big changes are definitely on the horizon. And that's why this debt sale is so significant. It's not just a financial transaction. It's a potential turning point for the platform.
It's like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books where each path leads to a drastically different ending.
I like that analogy.
Right.
And it highlights the uncertainty that surrounds X's future right now.
Speaking of uncertainty, let's go back to that political angle.
What?
You mentioned that some investors might be drawn to X because of Musk's political leanings.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that also alienate other investors and potentially even users?
Absolutely. It's a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Appealing to one group inevitably means repelling another.
Right.
And that's a delicate balancing act for any business, especially one as polarizing as X.
It's like walking a tightrope over a sea of opinions and trying not to fall into, like, the extremes on either side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this situation so fascinating to observe. We're seeing the collision of finance, technology, and politics all playing out in real time.
It's like one of those nature documentaries where you get to watch a pack of predators circling their prey.
Okay.
Except in this case, the prey is a social media giant.
I would definitely watch that documentary.
Yeah, me too. And I think a lot of people are watching this situation unfold, even if they don't realize the full implications.
Definitely.
Well, let's make sure our listener is one of the informed ones.
Right.
We've talked a lot about the potential impact on X, but what about the broader social media landscape?
Right.
Could this debt sale set off like a chain reaction that affects other platforms?
It's certainly possible.
Okay.
If X goes down a certain path, whether that's toward profitability at all costs or radical innovation, other platforms might feel pressure to follow suit.
Oh.
It could trigger a wave of mergers, acquisitions, maybe even some platform shutdowns.
So this isn't just about X's fate.
No, it's not.
It could reshape the entire social media ecosystem.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to understand the forces at play here.
Right.
The decisions made in the coming months could have far-reaching consequences for how we connect, communicate, and consume information online.
It's like a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon and causing a hurricane on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It captures the interconnectedness of our digital world.
Right.
What happens on one platform can ripple outwards and affect us all.
So we've established that this debt sale is a big deal. Not just for X, but for the entire social media landscape.
Right.
So let's zoom back in on those potential buyers.
Okay.
We've talked about hedge funds, firms that are kind of aligned with Musk's vision. Who else might be out there lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce on this debt?
That's where things get really intriguing.
Okay.
We could see interest from foreign investors, maybe even sovereign wealth funds, looking to gain influence over a very powerful communication platform.
Wait, so even governments could get involved?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, that adds a whole new layer of complexity.
It does.
We've already seen governments around the world grappling with how to regulate social media.
Right.
And owning a significant chunk of debt would give them a whole new level of leverage.
Exactly.
So it's not just about profits anymore.
No.
It's about power and control.
It is.
Who gets to shape the narrative? Who gets to decide what voices are amplified and which ones are silenced?
It's a very important question.
It is. And that's why this debt sale is about so much more than just money.
Right.
It's about the future of free speech, the role of technology in our lives, and the balance of power in a rapidly changing world.
A lot is at stake.
Okay, I'm officially hooked on this story.
Me too.
It's like a geopolitical thriller, but with a social media twist.
I agree.
I think our listener is feeling the suspense, too.
I hope so.
Speaking of our listener,
yes,
let's bring them back into the conversation.
Okay.
We've thrown a lot of information at them. But what does it all really mean for their everyday life? How might this debt sale actually impact their experience on X?
That's a key question.
It is. Let's break it down for them.
Right.
What are some concrete ways this debt sale could change their experience?
Well, depending on who buys the debt and what their priorities are, we could see a number of changes.
Okay.
The platform could become more commercialized, more ads, more paid features.
That wouldn't be surprising. I mean, most social media platforms are constantly looking for ways to monetize their users.
That's true. What else? We could see changes to the algorithm, the one that determines what content users actually see.
Right.
This could be influenced by the new owner's political leanings or their desire to promote certain types of content.
So our feeds could start looking very different.
They could.
Depending on who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. That's a little unsettling.
It is a little bit. Content moderation policies could also be affected.
Oh.
The new owners might have different views on what constitutes hate speech, misinformation, or harmful content.
Right.
This could lead to a more restrictive or more permissive environment, depending on their perspective.
Basically, our ability to express ourselves freely on the platform could be at stake.
It could, yeah.
That's a pretty big deal.
It is. It highlights the importance of being aware of who's controlling these powerful platforms.
Yeah.
And what their motivations might be.
It's like realizing that the Wizard of Oz isn't actually a magical being. It's just some guy behind a curtain pulling levers.
Exactly. And once you see the levers, you can't unsee them.
Right.
You start to question everything. The information you're consuming, the way the platform is designed, the motives of the people in control.
Okay, so how do we as users navigate this complex and often kind of opaque landscape?
Well, it starts with awareness.
Okay.
By understanding the forces at play, we can be more discerning consumers of information.
Right.
More thoughtful participants in online conversations.
Okay.
We can also hold these platforms accountable and demand greater transparency and responsibility.
So it's not just about passively accepting whatever changes come our way. Yeah. It's about actively shaping the digital world we want to live in.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the question we posed earlier. What events between late 2022 and now might have made the banks feel more confident about selling this debt?
Right.
It's a puzzle with many pieces.
Yeah.
But the answer might lie in a combination of market trends, X's own performance, and perhaps even a dash of political maneuvering.
Right. We know they tried to sell this debt in late 2022, but it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So what has changed in the world of finance or politics since then?
Exactly. That might just be the key to solving this whole puzzle.
Yeah, it really is like we're financial detectives trying to piece this whole thing together.
It is. It is. Trying to figure out why they're selling now.
Yeah. What clues can we find in the time between that first attempt to sell and now?
One thing that jumps out to me is the overall market sentiment.
Okay.
Remember, late 2022 was a pretty bleak time for the markets.
Yeah.
Inflation was soaring. Interest rates were climbing. There was a lot of uncertainty about the future.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that investors would be hesitant to buy up this risky debt tied to a company like X, which was already facing its own challenges.
Okay, so basically bad timing.
Yeah, basically.
Like trying to sell a luxury yacht during a hurricane.
Exactly, not a good look.
What about the time since then?
Right.
Has the market calmed down enough to make investors feel more comfortable taking on this debt?
It has to some degree, yeah. Inflation has cooled.
Okay.
Interest rates are still high, but they're not rising as rapidly as they were in late 2022.
Okay.
So that does create a more stable environment for investors, especially those looking for opportunities in tech.
Right. So maybe the tide is turning in X's favor, at least from a market perspective.
It seems that way.
But what about the platform itself?
Okay.
Has anything changed internally that might make it more attractive to potential buyers?
That's where things get interesting. We know Musk has been pushing hard to make X profitable.
Right.
And there have been some signs of progress.
Okay.
He's implemented some cost-cutting measures, introduced paid subscription features, even experimented with new revenue streams.
Okay, so maybe investors are starting to see X as less of a gamble?
Possibly.
And more of like a potential cash cow?
Yeah, maybe. We also can't forget about that political angle we've been discussing.
Right, of course. Could shifts in the political landscape also be playing a role in this whole debt sale thing?
Absolutely. We've seen growing concerns about the power and influence of social media platforms, both in the U.S. and abroad.
Right.
Some governments are even considering tighter regulations.
Wow.
Or even, outright bans.
So maybe some investors see this as an opportunity to kind of gain leverage over a platform that's facing increased scrutiny from governments.
Right.
It's like buying a controlling stake in a media empire just as the government starts talking about antitrust laws.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it highlights the high stakes involved in this whole debt sale.
Yeah.
It's not just about financial returns. It's about political influence.
Okay.
And the ability to shape public discourse.
Wow, that adds like a whole other layer of intrigue to this story.
It does. It does.
But before we get too lost in this world of political machinations, let's bring it back to our listener for a second.
Sure.
Why should they care about all this? How might this debt sale actually impact their experience on X?
That's the key question.
It is. So let's break it down for them.
Okay.
What are some of the tangible ways this debt sale could change their experience on X?
Well, depending on who buys the debt and what their priorities are, we could see a number of changes.
Okay.
The platform could become more commercialized.
Uh-huh.
With more ads and more paid features.
That wouldn't be surprising. I mean, most social media platforms are always looking for ways to monetize their user base.
What else? We could see changes to the algorithm.
Right.
That determines what content users see.
Yeah.
This could be influenced by the new owner's political leanings or desire to promote certain types of content.
So our feeds could start looking very different.
They could.
Depending on who's pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Right. That's a little unsettling.
It is.
Content moderation policies could also be affected.
Okay.
The new owners might have different views on what constitutes hate speech, misinformation, harmful content.
Right.
This could lead to a more restrictive or permissive environment, depending on their perspective.
Yeah, so our ability to express ourselves freely on the platform could be at stake.
It could.
That's a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal. It highlights the importance of being aware of who's controlling these platforms and what their motivations might be.
So how do we as users navigate this complex and often kind of opaque landscape?
Well, it starts with awareness.
Okay.
By understanding the forces at play, we can be more discerning consumers of information.
Right.
More thoughtful participants in these online conversations. We can also hold these platforms accountable.
Okay.
Demand greater transparency and responsibility from them.
So it's not just about passively accepting whatever changes come our way.
No, not at all.
It's about actively shaping the digital world that we want to live in.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty details of high finance
We have.
to the broader implications for social media, even our own online experiences. But as with any good deep dive, we're left with more questions than answers.
It's true. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It sparks our curiosity,
Yeah.
encourages us to think critically, reminds us that the world is this complex, ever-evolving place.
Absolutely. For our listener who's been on this journey with us, we hope you've gained a deeper understanding of these forces that are shaping the digital landscape and the role that you play in it.
Definitely.
The story of X's debt sale is just one chapter in a much larger narrative.
Right.
It's a story that's still being written.
It is, so keep asking questions.
Yes.
Keep exploring and keep engaging. The future of the digital world depends on it.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're bubbly